Alright, welcome back. Today I want to review another cool little pistol I have, and and just go over it. So this is a Steyr M9A1. Not like the Beretta M9, but just the size of it, which I guess stands for medium. So this is a cool little pistol because it looks really interesting and unique, right? These pistols go back actually quite a bit. I think as far back as like either like the late 90s. Wikipedia probably has a more complete history on that than I do, but these have been around quite a long time, and they've gone through a few generational changes that if you find a earlier version of these, they actually look a little bit different. So this is one of the later generation ones because it has the different, it's got a different frame, different texture, different style of logo down here, and it has the different like pick rail and everything else. But so I want to say there's like probably 4 generations of these things, and this is one of the later ones. And if you've also been keeping a good lookout for these things, they're coming out with an entirely new generation. They're calling them the A2s now, which have a completely different frame. They have a lot more aggressive grip. They got more pick rail space, all kinds of improvements for the gun that is still coming out. But because Steyr is not exactly a I don't know, U.S. based, or they don't put a lot of importance on the U.S. market, so the A2s have been coming out with an absolute snail's pace, and I've only seen the long models, the L9 A2s. I've only seen those come out. I haven't seen any other sizes yet, so they'll come out basically when they come out. But so that's a little bit of history about this gun, and if you have a sharp eye, you may notice that this looks somewhat similar to another gun. Another Austrian made gun, say a Glock. And that's because some of the engineers at Glock actually did work on this gun, so there's a lot of the principles they took from Glock during their time there have shifted over and are also in this gun. Most notably being the incredibly low bore axis, as you can see there. Super low, and your hand really gets up in there. I mean, look at that, just eats it up. So so this is the mid-size one, just the M9A1. Pretty simple, chambered in 9mm, and comes with 17 round magazines. They're pretty chunky. They're originally supposed to be 15, but I've only ever seen the factory mags have the plus base plate on here, which adds a +2. I've never seen 15 rounders for this. I've only seen the extended 17 rounders, so whatever reason that is, I don't know, but that's just what it comes with. That's what I bought it with, and So when I got this, I found out about these, I forget where, somewhere online, but they looked really stinking cool. So I thought, man, I need to get one of these, and it just looks awesome, you know, and a lot of internet reviews are really good about these. I think even Nut and Fancy, you know, as much as people deride him, he had a pretty good review on one of these things, and I was kind of sold on it. So I was looking around for one, but nobody at the gun shop even knows what these are, so I had to do some searching online, and you can find them online, but that just wasn't really satisfactory for me. So I was just home on leave one time, and I was going to the gun show with my dad, and one of our favorite dealers there happened to have this one, this exact one. But the thing was, it was used, so the price was a little bit low, and I was like, okay, it's a used one, it can't be all that great, right? Well, I opened up the case and I was looking at everything, and the guy must have fired like, I don't know, 2 magazines worth through it, and it was basically brand spanking new. There was no wear marks anywhere on the inside. The barrel itself had no wear marks, and I was just like, man, this is basically brand new. So I asked him how much he wanted for it, and he said, well, I know your dad so well, and you're in the military and everything, and you look like a good kid, so I'll give it to you for $375, no tax. So I bought it, and knowing the prices for these hover right around 500 to 600, depending on where you get them for a new one, I thought, hey, I can't pass that up, right? So I picked it up, and the rest is history. So I'm just gonna go down the list here, and I've been trying to do a little bit more like a structured review process for these things. So I'm gonna take a little bit from other reviewers and kind of the things that have worked for them, kind of get a more structured approach to it rather than me just rambling about my personal stories. So size and weight. So this is roughly, I'd say I don't want to say Glock 19 size, but it is kind of a big chunky gun. It's not like the biggest gun I have, but it's fairly chunky. It fills my hand up pretty well. You know, it's very medium in all aspects. You know, but I'd say the grip is actually a little long, mostly because everything just kind of sits up here, so the grip is a little long. Maybe like a 19X kind of profile would be an apt way to describe this gun. Weight. So I've actually added a few things on this gun from Ranger Point Precision. They offer a few accessories for this gun, but I'll get into that later. The weight is actually not too bad. I mean, it is a polymer frame pistol, so it was really never going to be that heavy from the start. I wouldn't carry this myself as a concealed carry. It's just, for me personally, it's too big, it's too heavy, it's too chunky. I just, don't like it very much for that purpose. But for a duty gun, totally fine. Totally fine. So, let's see, what's next? Accuracy. So as far as accuracy goes, I actually really like this gun because it has a fantastic trigger and really cool sights, which I will try to illustrate here. So, it's not quite lined up, but if you can see there, you get the front sight, which is that triangle looking thing, and then the rear sight is these two little, like, that's not focusing, these two little white lines there, and this forms a bit of like a trapezoid or triangle shaped sight picture. So if you line it up just right, that triangle fits right there in that notch. And that's a very unique sight picture. I've never seen that on any other pistol out there. And some people like it, some people hate it. I love it because I shoot very accurately with a chevron style of sight. So if you ever use like certain models of ACOG or certain primary arms optics have a chevron style sight, I am very precise with those because you basically have at least the theory is anyways, you have an infinite aiming point at the very top of your chevron, and that really works for me. So this is one of the most accurate pistols that I've shot, and I can, if I really take my time with some nice ammo, I'll get, on average 2-inch groups at 25 yards with this offhand, and that's just regular. It'll balloon out to about 3.5-inch groups at 25 yards with just regular 115 grain ammo if I'm not really taking my time. But I have gotten under 2 inches at 25 yards with this gun because the sights are just so accurate. So yeah, accuracy, definitely it's there. It'll shoot better than pretty much anyone who it'll shoot better than the shooter, basically. So as with most pistols, if you know a thing or two about pistol shooting. So ergonomics. So as you can tell, this is a very funky, weird looking gun, and you think, man, that can't be comfortable at all. But you know what? It actually fits quite well. It just really eats up into your hand. It sits very low. My only complaint is that this beaver tail does stick out quite a bit, so you have a lot of empty space here, which means it can rock. But you don't really notice it when you're shooting. It also has these finger grooves here, which I'm not really like a fan of that, but they work somehow. They just do. Controls for this, they're very minimal, very Glock-like, so the only control is the slide lock release lever, which is right here. My complaint is, though, it's a bit small. In classic Glock fashion, the controls tend to be pretty small, very minimal. I don't really like that too much, so it takes a little bit more work for me to operate this, to lock it back, to send it home. But at least the release is, like when I'm hitting it down with my thumb right here, it is so much more smoother than any Glock I've handled, and I quite like that. Magazine release is very small. Right there, that little kind of bar-shaped thing it's kind of strange, honestly. But yeah, it's not very positive. I'm not a huge fan. It could be better, but it does put those magazines right out, which is great. Because as we know with Glocks, it's polymer on polymer, so when you hit that release, it kind of just sticks in there a little bit, and then you kind of have to, get it out. These are metal magazines in a polymer mag well, so they just come right out. What else? So for racking this is actually quite difficult to rack for a regular polymer frame 9mm pistol. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it's a little bit harder than other guns of its class. Not terribly difficult, but still a little bit harder to do. Also, the slide is very, very small. It's almost like CZ75-esque in size, so really getting your hands and fingers on here to rack can be a little difficult. What else? But yeah, so it just feels great. I don't know how to explain it. You kind of have to hold one to know. It just feels really, really good. Let's go to takedown field stripping. So one negative about this gun that people will talk about is there is a little that little dial right there, the 2 dots, is actually a lock for this gun. So it ships with a little key that you put in there, and you kind of twist it around. You can put safe fire, whatever, it locks the whole gun up. Some people don't like those. I don't like them, but I have never had any kind of mechanical issue with the gun because of that lock system. So it's essentially not a factor for me. I don't use it. I never plan to. So for takedown, you're actually going to push that thing in, that little 2-hole key lock dial there. You can push that in, and you're going to pull that lever down. You're going to release the slide, and you kind of have to wiggle it a little bit, pull the trigger. There we go. And it comes apart. So let's get into the accessories that I got from Ranger Point Precision. And the first off will be in the frame itself. So if you see here, this frame is very much like what you'd expect. It's a big old steel frame sitting inside a polymer housing. The difference being that this whole chassis it's a chassis. So if you pull out if you pull out the lock here and the takedown lever, you can actually remove this whole thing out of the frame, just like a P320. In fact, the systems were so similar that Steyr actually sued SIG for I don't know what you call it, like intellectual property or something, or patent or something like that. But basically, they said that SIG copied their idea, and as far as I know, I want to say SIG actually lost that lawsuit and has to pay Steyr a whole bunch of money, but I don't remember the exact details, so look it up for yourself. But yeah, so this is a removable chassis, which is pretty cool. So if you saw in here, this is a big old brass weight, match weight from Ranger Point Precision. And this literally just sits inside the dust cover right here. There's just a big, empty space in here that Steyr originally meant to manufacture their own match weights to make this more like a competition gun, because competition shooting is actually very popular in Europe, if you didn't know. So Steyr, being actually kind of a sportsman's kind of high-end competition gun manufacturer over there in Europe, they wanted to make a pistol that could do that kind of thing for its customers that wanted one. But they never, as far as I know in the States, they never actually produced these match weights for these pistols. So all of the frames just have this big empty hole that just sits in there. So Ranger Point Precision decided to take up the slack and built their own big old brass weights that you just plunge right in there, and you have some screws that you put in there to keep it in there. It makes the frame a bit weightier. I don't remember the exact weight, but you definitely feel the difference when you do put it in the frame, and it makes the gun much more front heavy. Does it make a difference in recoil? I've noticed definitely a tiny bit. It doesn't jump around as much, because if you have a heavier gun, it doesn't recoil as much. So definitely flat shooting, even though it already was a flat shooter because of the super low slide and this low slide mass. So the slide and barrel itself is your pretty standard, Browning linkless design tilt barrel. And originally it came with a plastic guide rod and recoil spring, which I have since taken out and replaced with the Ranger Point Precision all steel guide rod, which is much heavier, and used the same recoil spring. So this adds a little bit more weight on the front of the gun. And of course, it's your regular, barrel and slide. Nothing really fancy, crazy to mention there. So we'll put this back together. But with all those accessories, it adds quite a bit of weight to the front of the gun, which I quite like. I feel like it makes the gun much more pleasant to shoot. Very flat. And I'll be coming out with some video of me actually shooting it. And I also have some video of me shooting my P6 which I'll be putting up as well. And if you watch those videos basically side by side, you'll see just how much more flip or muzzle flip that the P6 has versus the M9, which just kind of stays planted in your hand. And that wasn't like an intentional, like, oh, I'm just going to control it a little bit better. No, it is kind of a night and day difference with something like this. It just stays flat. It just doesn't move. Sometimes I also like shooting this with a weapon light on the front of it, because weapon lights also add a bit of weight in the front, which can make pistols a little bit more controllable to shoot. So it functions kind of like a match weight if you've ever shot with one of those. So let's go to value. So considering what I paid for this, $375, I mean, it was used, but that is an absolutely excellent deal if you ask me. And heck, I think even at $500, $600, the regular model like this, or even the L9s, are fantastic. Like these, I have had no reliability issues with this gun at all. The ejection's a little bit weird. It's not very consistent, but it hasn't jammed the gun up at all. So I've ran my whole gauntlet of 9mm ammo through it, everything from your usual brass case 115 grain to steel case, cheap Tula crap, all the way up to really nice match ammo like 124 grain from Gecko, actual match ammo, stuff like that. It runs everything perfectly fine. So so for $500, $600, these are a great value, I think. If you're like me and you basically want to shoot any other pistol other than a Glock because Glocks are boring, but you still kind of want a polymer frame, very, very low bore axis, kind of something different, something cool, this is definitely something that I think you would be interested in. So great value for the gun. I definitely think it's worth $500, $600, new, of course. So just something to think about. So yeah, I've already gone over the reliability of this. I've had no issues. Nothing fancy to say there. Yeah. So all in all, I'd say these are a excellent gun. I like it a lot because it just looks weird. It looks different. It handles really well. The trigger is pretty awesome for a striker gun. Better than any Glock I've shot. And the fact that it's super accurate. It has the unique sight system. It's from the other the other Austrian gun manufacturer, not Glock, but Steyr. I just think that's pretty cool, and it has it still has a couple elements from the Glock engineers. So to me, that's just really, really cool, and I don't know, it's just cool. So that's my take on the Steyr M9A1, and be on the lookout for the A2 models. I definitely am. I don't know if I'm going to get one right away, but at some point I would like to get my hands on one, because to be honest, the grip on these is a little bit slippery. So we'll see how those turn out. So yeah, that's all I got to say about the Steyr M9. Definitely try one if you can. Pick one up if you're interested in different stuff like me. So yeah, I think you'll definitely enjoy it. That's all I got to say about that.